Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this second session of InnoGrid webinar. We hope that you are all safe and that we will have as fruitful exchange and question and answer as what we had for our first webinar. I'm Laurent Schmidt, I'm the Secretary General of ENTSO-E, and I'm very happy to moderate the first part of this virtual session where we have a lineup of excellent keynote speakers who are going to introduce various perspectives of innovation in the broad context of the Green Deal and the need to transform the overall grid system. Before going to the detail of the panelists, I would like to remind a few housekeeping principles. So the video and audio is only allowed for speakers and panelists. And so we will use the camera only for the people facilitating the discussion and the speakers. And you will all have the possibility to participate through question and answers into Slido, which I'm going to look through the discussion, and I'm going to bring back into the debate the most popular question. So please indicate your name and company institution when you pose question. And we will also make sure that we will answer the question which remain unanswered through the discussion at a later stage. So as a consequence, the chat and raise hands feature of the Web2Meeting will not be used. So please log on to Slido and ask your question there. So I'm immediately going to jump into the first quick keynote, and I'm going to introduce here Michela Marasco, who is a policy officer in the T3 units working on innovation in the key areas of grid and energy management. So the core of the topics which we usually discuss into InnoGrid, and she's also the European Commission representative into ETIPSNet and ISGAN international platform, and she's going to speak about the research and innovation dimension in the overall EU Green Deal context. So Michela, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Laurent, for this introduction. And most of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at today's InnoGrid virtual session. And I'm very pleased to be here and to be able to address such a fundamental topic. So the role of RNI in supporting the green transition, and more specifically, how the new Horizon Europe will support the Green Deal, its priorities and its milestones. So if I had been asked to give this presentation, let's say some months ago, let's say early January, we would have easily skipped the first few slides and we would have dive directly into the ambitions, objectives, and the opportunity of the Green Deal. However, today, we need also to talk about green recovery and acknowledge that over the past months, the COVID pandemic has caused an unprecedented global crisis, whether from a public health point of view, but also from an economic and social point of view. And the pandemic has significantly affected all aspects of our life, but also the energy sector and, of course, the energy system in a number of ways. I'm sure I'm not saying anything new to any of the participants today. If I remember, for example, the significant drop in electricity demand, the low wholesale prices, the deferral of or even reduction of some of the investments which are planned or new, and as well to the disruption to a number of supply chains. And I'm thinking, for example, of utility system operators and the industry in general, which have been faced very often with shortages of critical parts, components, and equipment, materials. So everything which saw a constraint in the production of supply, especially when manufactured in countries which were really hard hit from COVID-19. And so the coronavirus crisis also had a significant impact on the generation mix, which saw a striking increase of renewable penetration. And this, in a way, makes us think that that the COVID crisis brought us challenges, but maybe also opportunity, and that this fast forwarding, let's say, of the energy power system into 10 years in the future has maybe highlighted also how necessary new solutions, for example, new flexibility solutions are in this in the world of today. So although the energy system has demonstrated a high degree of resiliency, I also understand that the ongoing innovation and the digitalization proved absolutely key in allowing the network operator to better manage this crisis scenario. And what you see here on my slide is really what we're planning looking ahead. So looking ahead, there is a need to learn from the experience and also react accordingly. And the next generation EU recovery plan proposals is really doing that. It's placing the European Green Deal at the center as the key EU recovery strategy. So recovery actions are to drive the competitive sustainability of Europe and what our President von der Leyen referred to priorities for our digital, green and resilient future. Next slide. So the green, just wait, next slide, please. Yeah, so the green energy transition and the initiative which are part of the Green Deal will be the absolute cornerstone of the recovery. But also, as you can see from some of the quotes which come from Next Generation EU, research and innovations are also at the very core of the recovery. The package foresees and recognizes that recovery and competitiveness must be based to a very strong capacity to innovate. Next slide. So this is how does the recovery package reflect this in practice? So this very primary role of research for the green transition, the energy transition. It reflects this in a number of instruments, of course, but in particular in the reinforcement of Horizon Europe and other programs. So if you look on your right here, at this part of the slide, you can see that there has been a foreseen reinforcement, so increasing the European support for health and climate-related research and innovation activities. And this, of course, include also research and innovation in energy. In the next slide, you can also see, and I think I put it there mostly for you to look at it later, some more quantification, quantitative information on the financial proposal, which are part of the recovery package, and what this does, and what this reinforcement means. You can see always there on the right. Next slide. So let's go about the Green Deal. So the Green Deal concretely translates into more ambitious objective in, let's say, the medium term for reduction targets, for emission reduction targets. So we're looking at 50–55%. But in the longer term, it really translates into making Europe the first climate neutral country by 2050. So to achieve this ambition, which has been set by the Green Deal, a very significant amount of investments is needed. So the Commission has estimated that for achieving the current 2030 climate and energy targets, this will require approximately 260 billion of additional annual investments, which is approximately 1.5% of the Union GDP if we take the figures of 2018. So this is absolutely very significant. And also some of my colleagues pointed me towards article and a couple of Twitter feeds, which are arguing that the COVID-19 crisis brought about approximately a 5 to 6% reduction in emissions in Europe. Now, admittedly, I do not know how accurate this figure is at the moment. However, I know that to reach the Green Deal objective, we need to reduce emission by at least 6% every year. And since we definitely do not want to do it through a lockdown or every year or some other type of crisis, the only viable way, so the real solution there is innovation. So this means that we need to have technology developed and brought to the market quickly. We need to massively deploy the most promising solution, which have been maybe demonstrated already. And only in this way we will be able to meet our decarbonization objectives. So next slide. But the Green Deal is not just a growth strategy, which would be already be something fantastic, but is also a roadmap toward how are we going to meet our decarbonization objectives. And here I wanted to put on a slide some part of the revision, the revised Commission work program. And you see that some of the very key initiatives for 2020 have been absolutely maintained. In particular, there's our initiative in support of the energy transition. So all these initiatives you see there, so a strategy for a smart sector integration, a renovation wave, the transition, so the strategy for offshore renewable energy, as well as the review of 10E regulation. These, they all have a very clearly a bearing on the energy system, grids, and networks. And they all encompass a very strong R&I component, or for better saying, they recognize the key enabling role of the research and innovation. Next slide. But what about Horizon Europe? How is Horizon Europe going to support this? Well, Horizon Europe will invest in the R&I basis, which underpins all the Green Deal priorities and the green and digital recovery. On top of regular calls, there are 4 Green Deal missions and several European partnerships with industry and member states that will focus on the green transition and will focus on making the Green Deal a reality. Also, a big and important role will be played by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and by the European Innovation Council, which is a sort of one-stop shop for innovators, focused on radically new breakthrough products, services, and processes. And but next slide. What I find is also very interesting is that before we even get to Horizon Europe, we have already sort of recognized the need to act as fast as possible on supporting the Green Deal through R&I. And so we have now a Green Deal call with around 1 billion euros. This is still relates to Horizon 2020 and is going to support, as you can see, several areas of the Green Deal. And when you look at areas 4, energy and resource efficient building, these are going to be calls in support, for example, of offshore energy. They're going to look at the renovation wave. We're going to be called on hydrogen and, let's say, with some elements related to smart sector integration. And also in this context, there are going to be very strong link with the data strategy, so with the digitalization side. This call will be published mid-September. And as we speak, we are just finalizing, consulting with member states to, let's say, iron out the final details. Next slide. So coming back to Horizon Europe, here I'm going to be brief, but we are gathering at the moment evidence and going through a very intense process of co-creation of objectives and work program calls. So in this process, we are also informally or formally consulting with stakeholders. For example, Bridge and DTIPSNet have helped out a lot, and several of you have been, let's say, giving us feedback on what are the key priorities. At this stage, unfortunately, we're not able to mention to you specific calls and topics because we are still waiting on the MFF agreement and on the actual agreement on Horizon Europe. However, I can already anticipate that within Cluster 5, Climate, Energy and Mobility, one of the main focus will be on energy system, grids and storage. And also we will work very closely with Cluster 4 on digital industry and space, as when it comes to the energy transition, these areas are strongly linked and we absolutely need a synergic approach. So next slide, and this is the last one. So although I cannot illustrate any of the topic of the future Horizon Europe, I made a little experiment and I created a word cloud on the basis of some of the internal inputs and ongoing discussions. And it's not super clear, but I think the clouds point to, nevertheless towards some of the key elements that will play an absolute important role in the upcoming Horizon Europe work programs with regards to energy system and grids in particular. And I can say, for example, integration of renewable, flexibility, the management of flexibility solution, for example, will be central. Of course, the digitalization of the energy system and everything that will be in support of the policy priority that I illustrate to you before. And Also, all the technologies which are related to this policy priority, and I'm thinking of HVDC technologies, meshed grids when we look at offshore energy, but also cost-effective and cost-efficient conversion processes. Something else that will be an absolute important element, and that is going to be particularly important, is going to be interoperability of solutions. We see this as one of the elements that we'll need to insist on. And we will continue also to work on cooperation among the key energy system stakeholders, so the DSO cooperation, but also maybe with aggregators and prosumers. And with this little overview, I will finish my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Michela. And so that's very promising to see all these great ideas on supporting the EU Green Deal developments, particularly onto the grid elements. I've not noticed any particular question for the moment to your presentation, apart from the fact whether we can have a copy of the presentation. So yes, we will share the copy of the presentation. So thanks again, Michela, for this keynote speak. And I propose to immediately jump into the following session, which is the view of regulators with Jan Kostevs coming. And so Jan is a leader on grid infrastructure in Acer. He has also a background working in a TSO as LS before, and is going to introduce how can we evolve the regulatory framework to enable more innovation. So Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laurent. I think we can, move to the first slide with the content. Thank you very much. So, well, the question on why should TSOs and DSOs be innovative? I think this is a very important question, and that's why I put it here, because in the past, I heard many experts saying that it's not the role of the TSOs and DSOs to be innovative. That is the role of research institutes, of faculties, of companies trying to sell their products, and so on. The role of the TSO and DSO is to operate the grids. But of course, without, let's say, the objective of usage within the TSO and DSO grids, I think innovation is sort of meaningless. And even though in part innovation will always be sort of focused on more on the research institutes, close cooperation with TSOs and DSOs needs to be there. Also, I think we are sort of at the crossroads right now, a very important crossroads, because on one hand, we have the grid as we have it right now, with, of course, all of its limitations. We have the changing system with more and more renewables, with different types of usage, for example, electric vehicles and smart meters and things like that, all adding up to the momentum, to say. And well, it's also increasingly difficult to build new infrastructure, which has always historically been the solution or the only solution on how to, let's say, maintain and enlarge, let's say, the grid. So I would say there are many reasons why TSOs and DSOs need to be innovative, but maybe to highlight the two main reasons, at least for me personally, it's that innovation or innovative solutions are often more efficient, more cost efficient than building infrastructure to solve the problem which arises. Plus, it's usually a solution which is more, I would say, easily accepted by the public, which we all know is very, very important if we want to do anything. So what should be the objective of TSO-DSO innovation? In that respect, I was trying to lead on into this efficiency aspect, because I think the grid as it is there to sort of do its job. But the standards on which this network was built are standards which more or less remain the same through the past, well, 100 years, give or take. So the thermal rating, for example, is the same. The security standards such as N-1 are sort of rigid and the same. So innovation could focus or should focus towards increasing the efficiency of the grid. And I think also innovation should sort of have an end goal, an objective, if it's done by the TSOs and DSOs. So the end goal should be very clear. What are we trying to achieve with that innovation? And this end goal or objective should be a measurable one. I think this is very important. And I heard in the past many times TSOs basically shaking their heads saying, well, you're expecting us to produce CBAs for innovative projects, you know that this is impossible. And well, I agree that this is very difficult, but I think since we are talking about basically public money to be used, I think efficiency has to be the driver here. And to measure efficiency, we need to measure also the costs and the benefits of the end objective, which might not be reached directly, of course, which might take some steps to reach, but at the end, there needs to be a measurable goal. If we move to the next slide, which is also the last slide of my short presentation, to talk about what the NRAs should do here. First of all, ACER and the NRAs are right now, as we speak, investigating the best regulative practices which should stimulate innovation in the sense which I explained before, innovation with an objective, innovation which is measurable. And well, I think again, I would maybe emphasize the fact that TSOs and DSOs can make the NRA lives much easier by producing quality CBAs also for their innovative projects. And with those in mind, I'm sure that regulators could not only just simply allow the costs of new and innovative projects, but also stimulate innovation. And I think this is a very important point which also needs to be done in the scope of the NRA frameworks. NRA frameworks simply allowing innovation to happen. So if basically the TSO or DSO decides to propose an innovative project, we have seen in the past that the majority of such projects are accepted by the respective NRAs and the costs are confirmed. But this is simply not enough because, you know, TSOs and DSOs, the rigid structures as they still are, they're not prone enough towards innovation. So they're not producing enough of these projects. And there should be a stimulus from the NRAs, from the frameworks in which the TSOs and DSOs operate towards becoming more innovative. And well, as mentioned, efficiency, I think, is something which we would like to highlight at this moment, which is because it's very sort of measurable and well, I think easy also to produce a CBA on that. Thank you very much. I was maybe a couple of minutes shorter, but I hope that helps, Laurent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I think I see a question which has come, even three. How ACER see the role of open source standards? What is ACER doing on open source standards? How to benchmark efficiency of between DSO on the DSO performance sides, and also a question related to regulatory sandboxes, as what we hear very often from the Florence School of Regulation. And maybe these are the three key questions starting. Maybe you can try to answer these ones.
Okay, so the first one you mentioned was on open code, right?
Open standards, open data, and so on. How do you see this?
Well, already in the past, years when we had this communication with ENTSO-E, especially ENTSO-E, of course, in that respect regarding innovation, we proposed that in our opinions many times that innovation should be shared, and I mean, redoing the same thing all over again in as many countries as I mean exist is a bit of a nonsense, right? So ENTSO-E could be probably the best facilitator of this in the future, meaning that not only are the results shared, but also the way of how to reach it should be shared broadly within ENTSO-E. Moving on to the next one, which was, please remind me, Laurent.
The DSO, that was more dedicated to DSO efficiency, performance. How do you see it benchmarking? Do we need to benchmark it? What's your view on that?
Well, I'm not a DSO expert, I have to admit, and also Acer as such, as an agency, is only slowly sort of becoming more and more involved in the world of the DSO activities. So it would be very hard for me to answer this, you know, in an expert manner. But what I would say is that if the operation of the grid is standardized, which I think is the same for TSOs and DSOs. I mean, I'm not saying the standards are the same, but you have standards. Then you have something which is measurable. If you can surpass that in a safe way, I think that's an efficiency increase of one kind, of course. Then you have many other, but this is sort of the way to go. You first need something which is measurable in the way how you are running your system right now, and then with an innovative approach, how do you increase the efficiency of doing that? And the last one was on the regulatory.
Yeah, regulatory sandbox, and maybe I would like to add one from Roberto, who is also asking here. So welcome, Roberto, to this second webinar. So what role do you envisage for the EU DSO entity in the evolution of the cooperation between TSOs and DSOs? Maybe if you can respond to these last two, and then we'll switch to the next speaker.
Okay, so again, it needs to crystallize a bit how the role of the DSO entity will work. But I think personally, it will be a very important role because the DSOs play right now, in the sense of smart grids, I would say the prevailing role. You have, you know, to some extent, control over the consumers. You can help the flexibility of the system greatly. So I think this is something which needs to work. And right now, with individual DSOs, it's very hard to do something like that. But as mentioned before, in the sense of the role of ENTSO-E to facilitate the TSOs, in that sense, ENTSO-E has a much easier job because, of course, the TSOs are not as many as DSOs are. So you're going to have, I mean, a difficult task. The DSO entity will have a difficult task ahead of it. So, but yeah, a major one, I'm sure. Regarding the previously mentioned sandboxes, well, they can play sort of a positive role, and I think sandboxes, it's fine, of course, testing grounds and things like that. But I think the step which I tried to sort of explain in my slides should happen before. I think firstly, you need frameworks which stimulate innovation. And then once you have that, once you have innovation rolling out and the TSOs doing the job, then of course, then you need to be as efficient as possible. Of course, not to duplicate, which was already mentioned before. So not to do the same thing all over again in as many countries, but try to, you know, really be productive and efficient as much as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan, for your inputs, and very interesting to hear how the regulators see this importance of innovation in relation to CBA and efficiency, as what you mentioned. Now I'm going to pass the floor to the next speaker, with Håkon Borgen, who is the Executive Vice President at Statnett, Norwegian TSOs working on technology developments, but as well as chair of our ENTSO-E Research and Innovation Committee, who has worked very hard in the past few months onto updating the roadmap for research and innovation in our community. Håkon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laurent. And I hope you all are safe and healthy under these challenging COVID times. But I think it's a real important topic, and I think also the green recovery logic is valid. So I'm here today to give you just a brief insight into what we have been working on the last, I would say, 12 months within ENTSO-E, and in particular focus on the innovation. And I'm really clear on the focus that innovation is a key component in order to deliver the Green Deal. And it's a huge effort to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And imagine we have been building the grid since, well, 100 years ago. And in the coming 20 to 30 years, a real transformation will take place. And what I would like to stress now in the beginning is that that is not possible to do unless we change a lot. And that's what I'm going to talk about, and we have to focus. So next, please, first slide. If you look into the mandate of ENTSO-E, one key component is linked to innovation. So the ENTSO-E Research, Development and Innovation Roadmap is a legally mandated research and innovation planning tool. And it targets the TSO decision makers and the ecosystem, the policy makers and other stakeholders. And it defines the main research and innovation priorities for the power production and transmission in the coming decade, based on trends in technology, new operational needs, market developments, and so on. And of course, constantly looking into updates and input from stakeholders. But what we did this time was to realize that the needed change calls for increased speed of innovation. So we actually looked into the historic way of doing this, where we have actually been more focusing on, well, technology trends. We would like now to shift it over from a catalog of technologies and solutions more to a problem-solving approach, identifying the main challenges and proposed use cases. And secondly, we will have increased focus on the TSO core activities and the planning, operation, and management processes. Third, we will reorganize into innovation areas. And now, as you can see, it's more structured around 3 clusters and 6 flagship projects. This is in order to enable more focus on system needs and solutions. And last but not least, because speed is important, a shift towards innovation activities with higher technology readiness levels to employ faster development and innovation for advanced infrastructures and solutions. Next, please. So in this context, we have to deliver according to the Clean Energy Package and Green Deal and the Green Recovery. It's a key top-down priority. And we have developed this RDI roadmap for the next 10 years now, based on 3 areas, 3 clusters. Well, the first one is what we call one system of integrated systems. This focuses on market expansion, electrification, sector coupling, TSO, DSO interface, and the coordination of market players, as you know. And this is the decentralized sales generation and increased electrification, which require the TSOs to adapt and to support a market expansion with a focus on the one system of integrated systems view, or only one. We can also call it one. It's a good name, easy to remember. And under here, we have digital technology, updated the roles and responsibilities of various actors. and it's coordinate the use of new potential for flexibility and infrastructure optimization, which will facilitate the expansion of the TSO. And we have electrification of transport, as you know, heating, cooling, all these are key elements here. We have 2 flagships identified, one dealing with the optimized cross-sector integration, and secondly, one dealing with the development of an ecosystem for deep electrification, which typically meets the TSO-DSO area. The second area, I would like to go back to actually one of the speakers before. Actually, Jan wasn't mentioning that, and that is the fact that we have a grid, and we need to utilize the grid. So we call it Cluster 2, the power grid, the backbone of the energy system, better usage of current assets and new system level solutions. Here we talk about the grid in itself. It's so important in order to deliver on this huge increase in electric flow in the grid. It will be a future we see where we have to focus on the grid, and future market integration requires increased grid capacity, optimization, integration of new technologies. And as a mid-term goal, the transmission grid will have to transport higher volumes of renewable electricity over long distances. And this implies for coming up with new solutions, which are there actually, controllable devices, control systems, cross-border infrastructure, which will ensure a better resource management where we can optimize the assets even better. And we will here focus on what we can say no regret technologies and processes with high technology readiness level that can deliver high benefits with low upfront costs, also mentioned now by Acer. And innovation should also be introduced to non-technological areas. And here we have a separate flagship. I will not go into all these flagships. It will be a deep dive event the 2nd of July. I'll come back to that. But I will go into one of them. And that is the next area, which we call Cluster 3, which is more the cyber physical system, maybe a little bit more the black box of the TSOs, where we develop the interoperability of the physical and the IKT layers. And here we will have to deal with a large penetration of power electronics, further digitalization, and stronger connectivity, which requires the TSO to take further action to ensure the technical soundness of this cyber physical power system. And system resilience, security, stability are keywords here. Restoration after big blackouts. And as you can see, we will have more and more HVDC coming into the grid. And interoperability of grid components, both hardware and software, is a key. And we need to look into multi-terminal use of DC and infrastructure with a lot of converters and cables all integrated. And we need, of course, new open standards. And we need to be independent of the different vendors. So interoperable solutions, technologies are really a key component here. And we have 3 flagships. The first one is dealing with Offshore Grid. I will say some words about that afterwards. And flagship 5 is really dealing with this hybrid AC-DC grid, which we now see coming up. And the last flagship deals with control centers and the enhanced control operation and interoperability into this future we foresee. So if you take the next slide, we see that the roadmap integrates the opportunity provided by these technology trends. Sorry, last one back, please. No, up there. And also the funding regimes, sorry, one back, are key. So these funding schemes, to fulfill this flagship, the European Commission and the programs fits very well. So the Horizon Europe and the Connecting Europe facility is well aligned with this. And we of course would like to use these in order to deliver on these flagships, which was also mentioned earlier. Next slide. As one example, we can see now the offshore grid. And the offshore grid, then we talk about large volumes of new generation into the European energy system. And this is not done before. And the question is it feasible? I'm responsible for some cable projects between Norway and the UK and Norway and Germany. And we know that the HVDC technology is there, but it's never tried when you have multi-terminal use at that scale. And the interoperability between the players, between the vendors. Do we have standard solutions for that? No, we don't. So it's a massive need for coordinated innovation between the TSOs, between the vendors, between the players to deliver this. And this is just an example of one of the roadmaps. And here, as you can see, one of the big milestones is really linked to a full scale, a medium scale, multi-vendor, multi-terminal HVDC demonstrator. We don't think it's a good idea that each TSO are doing that in its own garden. We can join forces and do that in a much more coordinated way. Next slide. So the way forward, the TSOs are strongly committed to deliver these flagship projects. And it's good to see that there are already significant activity in certain areas, such as deep electrification, enhanced grid use and control center operations and interoperability. And considering the numerous milestones to be achieved over the next few years, the realization of this RDI roadmap will require attention really to get the needed resources on board, because we need more people into innovation. And TSOs will have to pay due attention to other constraints, such as environmental impacts, permitting procedures, public acceptance, risk of stranded assets, and so on. We think that this RDI roadmap will deliver benefits, but we need to do this in a cooperative way. So we need actually to mobilize all of you. The whole energy value chain need to be with us, and we need to work together. And we need enhanced cooperation with other actors. And we need innovative structures that will mobilize the ecosystem in reaching these important decisions to reach the long-term goals we all strive to reach. And then we will go over to the next phase, which then will be an implementation phase. And that can take some time. And we need to find between the TSOs who is willing to do what. We need to cooperate with others, like the DSOs, who's going to follow this route. Can we join forces with the universities? Can you help us? But we think by doing this more targeted way of focusing on the challenges, it's easier to get the needed resources. It's easier to focus, and it's easier to deliver fast innovation. And we need financing, and we need to link it to Horizon Europe. It should be quite easy to see the link, and that will, of course, be the next step. How can we contribute, and how can we be sure that the needed resources are also directed to the right focus we have in these flagships we have now presented. And then it is also important for you to know that actually this is a draft. This is the first version. It's a consultation period. It was started, I think it was yesterday. And you have some time to go in and click on this link you can see here, and also join the event. If you take the next slide. The 2nd of July, then we will have a 2 hours deep dive into all the flagships. So you are free to comment on the consultation period and also to join this event in 2 days. So that, I think, closes my speech, and now I'm ready to take some questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Håkon. And I think I see few questions. One is related to the DC technology which you introduced, and whether you see any potential for the use of the DC technology also in urban area, and if yes, how?
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the first one. Then it's tempting to start with a DC history, because if you remember, then the DC was starting actually in rural areas, and I think one of the vendors called it HVDC Light. So in a way, it started at very low voltage levels some 15, 20 years back, and then I'm talking about the voltage source technology. But I think we should be open to that. That in this complex future where we have so much renewable, which is actually intermittent, we need to use DC not only on the top level but also downstream. But I don't know exactly the solutions, but I think that's one example where you can actually give valuable input for the roadmap we have just presented. So I think it's difficult to say no.
Okay. Another question is whether you feel the Brexit has an impact in European grid-related development in any significant way, in terms of innovation particularly, maybe?
Not particular. I think we have the same target. We would like to see emission-free global approach, and I think we're all dealing with renewables. And in the UK is a massive amount of renewables, and we're building a cable to the UK at the moment, and it's a very good match between Norway and the UK, with a lot of hydro in Norway. So I don't see that as any any real issue actually into this discussion, because innovation sees no borders. I think we should really focus on how we can join forces and come up with good solutions together.
Thank you very much, Håkon. I think these were the two main questions. I would like to, as a conclusion, to underline the significant effort which you have led through our Research and Innovation Committee and ENTSO-E. This was, I think, very important to prepare for the Green Deal, and that has resulted in very concrete flagship, as what I hope you can see. And we will look forward continuing the discussion around these elements into this next webinar. So now I'm going to switch to the last speakers of the keynotes, and from our DSO colleagues, Paddy Hayes, who is the Managing Director at ESB Networks, but also the very important co-chair of our TSO-DSO platform, in which we exchange a lot around innovation. And so, Paddy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Laurent. It's a real privilege to be at InnoGrid 2020 at the virtual sessions. And I appreciate the leadership that ENTSO-E and EDSO is showing in this area. It's wonderful to see ENTSO-E and EDSO working together, sharing trends and developments in technology, providing a showcase for innovations, and discussing their application to electricity networks in order to lead the transition to a low carbon future. And I wonder, could I have the next slide, please? So it's my privilege, as Laurent said, to have become recently involved with the TSO-DSO platform, which was encouraged by the European Commission to the mutual cooperation and interaction of TSOs and DSOs. And it's been a real pleasure to work with my fellow co-chair, Michael Jessberger from Transnet, with Laurent and the association at ENTSO-E, and with the 4 DSO associations also. And the cooperation the TSOs and DSOs has continued to develop, and I believe that that's very important. You can see from this slide that it started initially by agreeing some guidelines for reinforcing cooperation, but then moving into the area of data management, and then more recently into an integrated approach for active system management. And this, to my mind, and I think this is supported by Håkon's comments in the previous speech, to my mind, this is one of the most difficult, but also one of the most critically important challenges for the electricity networks. Active system management will be absolutely essential as we lead the transition to a low carbon future and enable a green recovery. by accommodating increasing levels of renewables and distributed generation on our networks, and also by facilitating the whole-scale electrification of heat transport in society. This is about doing things that have never been done before, and it requires massive innovation and massive collaboration. So if I could have the next slide, please. I think the clean energy package underscores the importance of DSOs and TSOs working together. So it's not only in planning and operating networks, but also in order to achieve coordinated access to resources such as distributed generation, energy storage, and demand response. And to repeat, this is about doing things that have never been done before, and it requires massive innovation and collaboration. You can see on the right that the range of topics for the 2020 work plan discussed between ENTSO-E and the DSO associations, that's EDSO, Eurelectric, Geode, and SEDEC. It's expanding from the areas of governance and planning into the areas of operations and active system and demand side management, areas where the innovation and collaboration are really essential. So I appreciate Hakon's comments earlier on about the opportunities for innovation at the interface between TSO and DSO, and particularly the opportunities for cooperation and joining forces. I think he's very what he said, that the intermittent renewable generation and the increases in that is going to provide challenges for our networks. We're going to together. On the next slide, I'd like to share a quick example from Ireland. So in Ireland, we have lots of potential wind resource, both on and offshore, but as a small island network, we've needed to innovate to accommodate increasing levels of intermittent renewable generation. Ireland's TSO, ENTSO-E, developed a program called DS3, which stands for Delivering a Secure, Sustainable Electricity System. As the DSO, ESB Networks worked alongside ENTSO-E to identify an efficient means to harness the reactive power capability of distribution-connected renewable generation. The solution they come up with is known as the nodal controller, and it's designed to provide reactive power support to the transmission system. And to provide that reactive power support, managing voltages on the transmission system by actively managing the reactive power export from distribution-connected renewable generators, whilst at the same time, and this is really important, ensuring that the operational thermal and voltage limits on the distribution network are observed. If I could move to the next slide, this trial nodal controller has been installed in a trial location. It's now being evaluated by ENTSO-E, the TSO, following ESB Network's initial DSO evaluation and testing. And the early results indicate that the nodal controller can enable the provision of reactive power support from distribution-connected renewable generators to the transmission system while still observing distribution network limits. Of course, I'm biased, but I think this is a really nice example of innovation and cooperation at the interface between the distribution and transmission systems, and in the space of providing the system services that are increasingly important given the rising levels of intermittent renewables on our network systems, as Hakon called out earlier on. Of course, we've also seen some excellent examples of innovation during the course of the first InnoGrid virtual conference. And I really appreciate the comments of Jan from Acer in making sure that we don't reinvent the wheel in different locations, but that we share and coordinate innovation. And in that regard, it was really important to see ENTSO-E's RDI roadmap from Hakon. In terms of joining forces, EDSO is currently, with its members, involved in 6 large innovation projects, 4 Horizon 2020 innovation projects, 1 H2020 coordination and support project, further Erasmus project, and is preparing a 7th together with ENTSO-E called OneNet. And I believe that there's going to be a discussion of one of those projects coordinate in the next session. Of course, a sustainable, safe and competitive energy supply will continue to be critical to improve the competitiveness of Europe's economies and the delivery of the green recovery. With more than 350 million citizens served and 27 billion euros investment per annum, 7 million kilometers of distribution lines and about 35% of the value chain of the electricity sector, DSOs play a critical role in delivering on Europe's ambition for the green recovery. And last week, EDSO handed over to Commissioner Kadri Simpson a white paper on the role of DSOs in the European Union's recovery plan and the acceleration of the Green Deal agenda. And it's definitely worth a read. Achieving the green recovery goals that the Commission is defining towards a more sustainable energy sector and increased sector integration I think will require even further investment in innovation and even more collaboration. Can I finish, Laurent, briefly by thanking, congratulating EDSO and ENTSO-E on a fabulous series of InnoGrid virtual sessions. I'm really looking forward to the next session where we'll hear about even more innovative projects. And just to sum it up in my perspective by saying that innovation and cooperation between TSOs and DSOs is absolutely essential to achieving the green recovery goals and to leading the transition to a sustainable energy future. In my view, it's the key to turning the European Green Deal from promise into practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy, and thank you for this very concrete example of innovation in between TSO and DSO in the case of reactive power as well. You highlighted, but as well reminding the roadmap which we have in our joint ENTSO-E, ENTSO, and other DSO association platform. Among the questions which are raised, I see one around what incentive do we need to get all the small DSOs to join into a larger pool to be able to become innovative, provide services, and cooperate with TSOs. Do you have any idea on that specific aspect?
Well, I think, Laurent, the creation of the DSO entity is going to be a major step in this regard. And I know there was a question earlier on from Roberto, but the development and the creation of the DSO entity has been developed over a long period of time. It's getting very, very close to reality now. And I think that is going to provide one dimension of that, certainly is that aspect of cooperation and formalizing and supporting that cooperation between DSOs and TSOs that I believe is so important, and that in the interim period is being carried out by the TSO-DSO platform. It's really important.
Okay, thank you. And there is another one which is around more Spain moved from 100 DSOs to 20. Germany has about 800 DSO and 4 TSO. How can the Spanish model be transferred to other countries? So do you feel that ultimately the DSO will end up being very large as what we see in some countries, or is it really depending on countries?
Yeah, Laurent, I'm going to kick for touch on that question. So I'm not really competent to speak about
okay.
the individual DSO makeup in different member states. So
fine, fair enough. So
I think the key is, irrespective of the structure in different workings in different member states, the real key here is, and I think Jan called it out, not reinventing the wheel, making sure that we can collaborate on innovation. The prize here is too important. The prize is about the decarbonization of society through clean electricity. That's my belief. And it's going to require everybody to put their shoulder to the wheel and work to do things that we've never done before. And that's going to require increasing levels of innovation and levels of collaboration that we've never seen before between DSOs themselves, between DSOs and TSOs, and then also between system operators generally and many other players, customers, supply companies, technology companies, and so on. It's going to be about collaboration.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Paddy, and that resonates very well with the, I think, first flagship which we have and which was mentioned by Akon about this system of interconnected system and bringing all this together. And so we look forward to the continued collaboration with the platform and the DSO entity in the future, particularly onto these innovation aspects. So thanks a lot, and
see you soon.
I see you soon. So I'm now going to hand over to the next part of the InnoGrid conference, which is going to zoom down on certain projects and I'm going to hear as well. So Torsten, the floor is yours, as well as a camera.
Thank you, Laurent, much appreciated. I think then in the second part, we are now going to take a closer look at 4 different R&D projects on both by TSOs and DSOs and also combined. And I think what we are building on here is the joint ASM report, the joint report from ENTSO-E and the 4 DSO associations published more than a year ago on active system management. And we have 2 major topics still open in that report. We've also marked that we said, okay, we still have to do further research on that. One thing is the combination or structure of markets, especially between the use of flexibility for congestion management on a distribution scale, with the use of flexibility for congestion management by the TSOs and the transmission system. And then, of course, the question should be maybe also have a link on combine these two congestion management uses with the use of flexibility for balancing. That's one. I think that's one of the main open points that we've identified a year ago. And the other one is the delineation of what's to be done in the regulated domain concerning the management of flexibility, and what should be more probably be left or should be done and approached and addressed in the competitive domain. These topics will certainly or probably gain in importance, and I think we have to find answers, common answers to these, and we have to find convincing answers, especially in view of the fact that there's at least a probability that TSOs and DSOs will soon be working together on the network code on demand side response or demand side flexibility, and having that probability or that possibility in mind, I think it's good that we have these R&D projects addressing the questions. So from that point of view, I'd like to hand over to Yvonne. Yvonne is going to give us an overview of the Swedish demo of the coordinate projects. I know that you've had a look into markets, Yvonne. I know that you've had a look at how different markets relate to each other. So it's about the competitive and regulatory domain. I know you've already have first results. You've had experiences with platforms, and you are going to take a deeper look into that in the next 2 years of the project. Please, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Torsten, and thank you all participants. I'm very pleased to be able to listen to you, but also to participate with the Coordinate project. And let's start with the next slide. Just to give you a little bit information about the Coordinate project, it is a very large project with 33 parties that started last January 2019. And our objectives are to demonstrate the activation and provision of services through a TSO-DSO coordination that was mentioned before, to define and test standard products that provide services to the network operators, and to develop a TSO-DSO consumer collaboration platform. Next page. We have 3 demo sites totally in Europe, one in Spain, Greece, and in Sweden. In Sweden, we started quite early, and we have had a lot of dialogue with a lot of people. I think we had 60 well-attended dialogue meetings with 500 different people participating at the various meetings only in Sweden. And of course, we also had meetings on the European level. And we have shown in the first demonstration last winter a more dynamic and digitalized way for DSOs to utilize flexibility for the operation of the network. And the markets have demonstrated how to coordinate with and complement existing markets for electricity trade. Next slide. Starting this project, we actually looked on what do we need to be able to work with flexibility and market for flexibility. We need to look at flexibility planning, at operating flexibility. We need to work with grid forecasting, something we haven't worked with. We have to work with TSO and DSO coordination, with the interfaces between flexibility provider, TSOs, DSOs, with the marketplace, with real-time metering, with load forecasting for flexibility providers, with the flexibility product development, and also customer engagement. And this is really change management. You have to look at all these aspects, and now been working with them. I can say it's only in the beginning of the journey. So let me tell you a little bit what we have done. Next slide. So what have we done now last winter? We've been demonstrating the flexibility service congestion management day ahead on 3 demo sites in Sweden. In Sweden, the power level is limited by subscription levels between the local DSO and the regional DSO, and between the regional DSO and the TSO. And violations of this subscription limits subject to cost and may also be denied. So this is where we have the congestion. This is a little bit different than in other European countries. I just wanted to explain how we define congestions. The DSO utilizes flexibility services to lower the peak demand in the grid during the winter in Sweden, November to March. And the grid state forecast makes it possible to call for flexibility day ahead, working proactively to alleviate grid congestion that has strong correlation with temperature. And the flexibility provider sells its flexibility on a day ahead market that is coordinated with other markets. Next page. We have 3 demo sites: Skåne with heating pumps, gas turbines, gensets, and EctoGrid; Uppland with electric boiler, heating pumps, aggregator, gas turbine, EV charger, and waste incineration; and Gotland with electric boiler and heating pumps. We will also have a 4th demo site but that I won't focus on today. Next slide. So totally we had I can take that later. The coordination with other markets was made in time, but also in the future we will have the possibility to use one platform for both the DSO and the MFR market in Sweden. But the coordination in time is that if you work on the capacity day ahead market, you place your bid before 9:30, and then the local DSO calls for the flexibility they need. And if they haven't called for the flexibility, it can be called by the regional DSO. At 10:30, the market closes, and after that, you have the day ahead market. And after that, you have the FCR market. On the intraday level, you will have the coordinated, the DSO market will be 2 hours before delivery. So it will be before the intraday market and before the MFR market. So this has been the way we have chosen to coordinate the different markets. And the MFR market and the DSO market will be on the same platform for next winter. So you will also have a coordination that makes it easier for flexibility providers to participate. Next slide. You see here some pictures from the platform. The flexibility providers enters BIBs to a website. It will be APIs in next winter. And you have the forecast of grid state from third-party provider. And the DSO utilizes flexibility services to lower the peak demand in the grid. And the platform proposes bids to clear based on impact factor and on the merit order list. So it comes with a recommended bid list that is based on impact factor and merit order list. And also you can use the platform for decision making from the operators. So you receive measurement and production plans, for example, of major FSPs, and you can also see load prognosis or load forecasts that are 1 week old. You can use it for deciding what do we need to call for. Is this data that we have, is it correct or not correct? So it's really important in decision making for the DSO operator. Next slide. So this is just showing all the complicated information sharing. One big issue is information, and the Swedish model has been actually to work through a hub. So the DSO has a hub that is outside of our normal system, the SCADA, and I think it's very central in getting a solution where we have a lot of information that has to be shared with different parts. Next slide. Impact factors. For the DSO local grid in Uppland, impact factors for loads were computed. Sometimes they're called coincidence factor. And this is to see if the FSP is likely to have high load when grid congested. We will probably go for having a baseline next winter, but this was the way we worked in the first demo. For a DSO regional grid, an impact factor is derived similar to the power transfer distribution factors used by ENTSO-E in flow-based capacity calculations methodology for the day-ahead market. This is to know how many megawatts production influences power flow through different substations. But this was, I would say, the version 1 of working with impact factors, and we are already working with the version 2. Next slide. The issue of remuneration is also an issue where we actually had this winter as learning phase. You can look at the production plans. You can sometimes it's for producer production plan, for consumer a baseline. You can monitor control system commands. You can look at trust. In Sweden, we believe in trust, even in the energy sector. And you can also compare forecast to metered outcome. And we've been evaluating these different methods. And I think the method we will be working with more in the future is going to be baseline, but it's a lot of issues there that we have to discuss and learn before having a more, I would say, a perfect system. Next slide. So overall results, the use of flexibility was successfully elevated network congestions. And this can be seen by the decrease of subscription levels violations between TSO and DSO during the times the market has been operating. And the platform has been developed in an agile way within the Swedish Coordinate Consortium. And we had very positive feedback, not only from the DSO operators, but also from the flexibility providers, praising the user-friendly applications, fulfilling all basic needs to participate, as well as informative and even enjoyable visualization. And the results will be published here now it will be in July, beginning of July, on our Coordinate homepage. Next slide. Next. But stop. I just want to see here. So here's some results. We had totally 20 resources. One resource was an aggregator with 340 houses. And as you see here, we had a lot of volume cleared in Uppland, 3.3 gigawatt hours between January and March. But in Skåne and Gotland, we didn't have as much volume cleared. Actually, there was no grid need during this winter because it was a very mild winter. So they were performing tests. The market worked better in Uppland because the grid need is much higher. So even though we had a mild winter, we had a lot of volume cleared. The prices, I wouldn't look at them now. I wouldn't say that we this winter learned a lot about the pricing. I hope next winter will give us more information. Next slide. So, learnings. There's a small need for flexibility due to low power consumption as an effect of a historically warm winter. And the volume on the flexibility markets for congestion management was enough, but mainly due to participation of one big scale flexibility provider. The competition among bids was not good enough, with lower level of bids available than hoped from some flexibility providers. And better knowledge from the provider of control system is needed for unlocking flexibility more widely. Next slide. The coordination scheme with cascading market closing times worked well, but to fully unlock the potential of flexibility, the day-ahead market and also the MFR market needs to be complemented with an intraday market. An additional benefit during the project has been the dialogue between DSO and TSO that created new values and understanding how better coordination can lead to a more efficient grid use. And this is something we are actually already using in other projects. Next slide. We had a very good cooperation between the DSOs and TSO in Sweden. And the FSPs, we have several flexibility providers underestimated the effort and time needed for preparation to provide flexibility. And certain flexibility providers can only participate on a day-ahead basis in Sweden, for example, some industries and district heating. Other flexibility providers prefer to provide flexibility closer to delivery hour, for example, aggregators or energy storage. So further digitalization, giving the possibility for bidding and calling through APIs was asked for. And this also we will have next year. Next slide. The volume of needed flexibility in Sweden varies heavily year from year due to weather. Compatibility with regulation is required for DSO to use flexibility services on market-based terms. And flexibility providers need to know the investment in planning, process development, and technical infrastructure will pay off. Business case with free bids is inefficient for customers to invest time and money to become flexibility providers. The main driver on this demonstration was actually climate and making something good for society. It was not money. DSO needs to know that the flexibility will be available when most required. So we believe that a way to promote flexibility services maturity is to combine a market with bids with availability remuneration, like you have it on certain FCR markets. So compensations to flexibility providers needs to be evaluated to find the right balance between availability and activation remuneration, at least during a transformation phase until you have a lot of flexibility providers. Next slide. On the DSO level, one of the more difficult and time-demanding issues was handling data management security. Central hub for all data proved valuable. Platform was greatly increased visibility of upcoming grid situations for control room of operators. And flexibility services day ahead depended on good grid state forecasting and requires production plans of major loads. Developing and operating the platform as an integral part of the DSO grid planning and operations provides understanding for needs, changes, and possibilities when acting DSO with higher level of visibility. And the development of the platform and the flexibility market by a DSO has shown to be extremely valuable in competence development, mindset, and cultural understanding, flexibility. And this is really a journey for a DSO. Next slide. What are we doing next? We are working to have also the intraday market. We will have the MFR market in the platform, and it will be it will be a pilot within Sweden, so you can participate with 1 megawatt and not the limit 10 that you have normally. We will also work with the peer-to-peer market. We will have a blockchain test. We will have the API for bidding and calling. We will improve the load forecasts, and we will also improve the methods for remuneration and the verification of cleared flex. So thank you very much. This was the presentation of the Swedish demonstration, and there is more information and reports on the Coordinate project, and also follow the Spanish and the Greek demonstration that is coming next winter. So thank you very much for me.
Thank you, Yvonne. We are a bit over time, but I think we have time at least for one question. I think there was a very interesting one that is asking about the division between a competitive and regulatory domain. The question is that you, at least the understanding was that you say that the forecast is done by a third-party provider. Do you mean that the forecast is done by it's independent of the system operator, and do you really think that this is a way forward?
Actually, we in Vattenfall distribution, we had a project on grid state forecast, and it was by an independent party that wanted to learn more about DSO grid state forecast. And I mean, they are much better in making that kind of artificial intelligence than we. So I think it was more about that they had the tools and are better in doing the job And I do think, for example, like you have with weather forecasts, you have different forecasts. In the future, a DSO perhaps has its own forecast and one or two external ones. I mean, that wouldn't be something that would be bad. I mean, there is a dilemma that you have to have a lot of knowledge about the grid. You have to understand the flows. You have to understand different grid status. But I mean, they have other competences, and we have shared these in the Coordinate project. But we have been happy with the independent provider, and they have done a good job.
Thanks. I think that could be interesting for a whole separate webinar one day, and maybe we're going to set that up. Unfortunately, as I said, we are a bit pressed on time, so I'd like now to pass it on to Antonio, who's going to introduce Jan Butke with the EcoSysFlex project. On to you, Antonio.
Thank you, Torsten. Yes, we are a little behind time, so I will give the floor directly to Jan Butke. He is from InnoGrid, the coordinator of European Regulatory Affairs and Projects, and he will talk also about the work package 3 of EcoSysFlex, particularly the market design. Jan, the floor is yours. Jan, are you there? Did you unmute yourself?
Now you should hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
well.
Perfect. Thanks. Let's skip directly to the first slide, please. Okay, first some key facts about EcoSysFlex. It's a Horizon 2020 project which started end of 2017 and lasts for 4 years. We have a budget of around 27 million euros, which is getting distributed among 34 partners and 7 demos. In total, we have 3 TSOs, which are Ellering, PSE, and InnoGrid, and 3 DSOs in the project, which is EDP Distribução, eDistribuzione, and InnoGrid. And all these 3 DSOs have also demos which show how TSO, DSO coordination can work. Next slide, please. Here you see 3 deliverables from work package 3, which deals with market design and system services. 2 reports have just been published. You can download them on the website ecosysflex.com. One report was about the quantitative assessment of different market design options. This is report 3.4, and my focus of today will be on the report 3.2, which is about conceptual market organizations for the provision of innovative system services. Next slide, please. Here you see what it will be mostly about. Torsten mentioned earlier the ASM report, which has been published last year. Here you see a figure from the ASM report with the commercial domain on the left side, starting with the flexibilities, the aggregators, and the flexibility markets, reaching into the regulated domain on the right side, which are the TSOs, the DSOs, and potential TSO-DSO coordination platforms. In the project, we have had some hot discussions actually on the role of market operators, whether they should clear bids based on grid data, based on rich grid data, or whether also it might be feasible if other parties select the bids, such as the DSOs and the TSOs, for example. But we also had discussions on the advantages of centralized and decentralized optimization and the questions whether this directly relates to one or more marketplaces. And we also discussed the potential of joint procurement, of balancing, and congestion management. In order to especially discuss the question who selects bids based on which grid data, we introduced a new role, the optimization operator. Next slide, please. Here you see the scheme of centralized optimization with comprehensive grid data. On the top, you see the different roles, not actors. And here you see that the optimization operator in the middle has the central role or task of collecting comprehensive grid data, and this data which describes the electrical properties of the grid in order to select the most optimal combination of flexibility, bits, and switching measures. We describe this case because we think that in future grids are more digitalized. There will be more switching options for the grid operators, and that is why in general both measures, switching and flexibilities, can solve the same, at least local problems. So solving thermal or voltage problems, which is why you have to consider both in the end if you want to strive for the most efficient solution in the end. Of course, also other variants are possible, and we also describe them in the report, such as sending partial grid data, so sensitivities for one topology. I think this is also the case which has been described by Coordinate earlier, or it is possible for non-locational bits to send bit limitations. Another aspect which we found out was that when you look at the different options for optimization and coordination, the number of marketplaces are not so relevant anymore. You can have one or many. The optimization principles and the advantages and drawbacks stay the same. Next slide, please. Now here you see decentralized optimization. The difference to centralized optimization is that each system operator role has its own allocated optimization operator role. So each optimization operator receives the comprehensive grid data from the respective system operator, runs the grid assessment in order to select the best bits and the best switching measures, and also does the coordination with the other optimization operator. There are three different coordination approaches. The first one is the bottom-up coordination. There we found out that this one is efficient, especially for regular grids, and if you focus on the optimization of only one scarcity, so for example, congestions. Top-down approach is only possible in case of, let's say, static DSO grids. So if the TSO, if it's only pure top-down, then the OOT would select bits in the distribution grid, and there wouldn't be any chance that there would be a veto. So that's only possible with a certain kind of pre-qualification. And then the last one is a hybrid approach, which means first bottom-up and then top-down. And this might be more efficient in some single situations, in case of mesh grids, and in certain cases of flexibilities with certain prices and locations, or if you want to optimize or select bits for voltage control and for congestion management jointly. So if you have market-based approaches for both. Then what we also found out that decentralized optimization does not reduce liquidity by design. Next slide, please. Here you see the advantages of both optimization principles. We did not write down the disadvantages because they are just the mirror. On the left side, you see the centralized optimization, which of course leads to less coordination effort. And since you have all data on one platform, the likelihood is higher that you might achieve the fully optimal solution. Then you also have economy of scale aspects because you have one algorithm, so you only have one server. So maintenance efforts, etc., might be lower. And interoperability issues are also lower because everything concentrates on one interface to the OO. So in the end, you have only one, let's say, one set of rules. On the right side, you see the advantages of decentralized optimization.
Antonio, are you still there? Is it only Jan that's disconnected?
Jan was disconnected. I was disconnected. I'm now. Did he finish his presentation?
I am back. Sorry. Somehow my internet connection got lost.
Yes, please. Did you finish? Can we go to the questions? Because I was also disconnected. Jan, can you hear us? Because we don't have questions on the Slido, but still I can do some questions provided that Jan is able to listen and then reply.
Yeah, unfortunately, on my list, it says he's offline.
Okay, I think we go to the next presentation, but I will keep track of questions on Slido and we can come back to Jan later. Please, Thorsten, you present the next project.
Perfect. George is giving us an insight into the interface project. That's a new Horizon 2020 project. And it's not only focused on TSO-DSO cooperation, as far as I understand it, but also on building a European-wide applicable architecture for a lot of details. And of course, the interesting thing is also in view of upcoming standardization, I mentioned the possible network code on demand response earlier. George, do you already have insights into exactly what should probably be standardized, or are you still researching that? And I think that would be a very, very, very valuable contribution to what we'll be doing in the next few months. George, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Thorsten. Yes, I'm afraid that we do not have the answers for your questions, as we are now, as I will present to you, we are now actually running the second year of the project. So let me start from the beginning. So thank you for this introduction. Interface. I'm George Voulotakis from European Dynamics, and I'm representing the Interface Consortium. So Interface stands for TSO-DSO Consumer Interface Architecture to provide innovative grid services for an efficient power system. So next slide, please. So in the second slide, you can see some key facts. And answering to your question, Thorsten, we are, as I said, we are now running the second year of the project, meaning that we have 2.5 years yet to go. We have currently, let's say, sort of deciphered the expectations of the different end users, the system operators, and other actors of the energy value chain. We have designed what I will describe later, our open architecture, the Ict architecture that stands for Integrated Pan-European Grid Services Architecture, which is an open architecture that actually encourages more actors to get connected to the let's say system and coordinate their actions. So we have still quite a few things to decipher, a few things to define, and hopefully by the end of the project, which is in December of 2022, we will be in the position to also propose things to the policymakers and make any standardization activities available to the relevant bodies and fora. So if I may start, next slide, please. So I will briefly, next slide, please, yes. So I will briefly present how Interface was born, what is the vision. So the challenge that we were asked to face, let's say, is the need to remove the barriers in the European power system, unleashing the potential of the existing and future resources so that they are an active part in the power system, of course, for the benefit of the customers and the grid operators. At the same time, there was a need to drive the coordination through digitalization and to demonstrate how marketing platforms enable system operators, market operators, and other actors to connect and procure energy services. There was a need to increase transparency and interoperability, proposing common concepts applicable to the whole of Europe, to bring the consumer as part of the core activity to the center, and combine local markets and congestion management markets with wholesale and balancing markets in a way that this would increase the cost efficiency in network operation and would create benefits for the consumer. And finally, to create new business opportunities and promote SMEs, startups, innovators, and being part of the electricity sector. So next slide, please. So why this is happening now? I think that all people in this audience are aware of the progress of the evolution. So the European energy system has been undergoing, I would say, a radical transformation during the last decades. At the same time, the European Commission has adopted all legislative proposals on the energy market. So now TSOs and TSOs are requested to define the services they want to procure and to make this in a coordinated manner in order to ensure, let's say, optimal utilization of resources. And also, we have in our hands novel technologies that are here to reinforce decentralization of resources, coordination and active system management, and also customers' engagement and participation in the electricity market. Next slide, please. So, following all this introduction, what is the interface vision? Is to design a common architecture, what we call, as I said earlier, interoperable pan-European grid services architecture, the Ict architecture, that will connect actors and markets in a transparent manner and will allow a pan-European electricity exchange. To drive the collaboration in the procurement of grid services by TSOs and DSOs and to create strong incentives to connect customers by improving market signals and allowing them to procure services based on specific locations and grid conditions. To integrate small and large-scale assets to increase the market liquidity for grid services. To define and demonstrate standardized products, key parameters, and promote state-of-the-art digital technologies in order to engage these technologies into the next generation electricity market transactions. So in a nutshell, and if I may say what is interface in a, let's say, a short paragraph, I would say that interface envisions the proper coordination of the energy stakeholders, and especially between the transmission and distribution system operators, and also a more transparent market mechanism that will allow the participation of more actors, who also favor smaller consumers or consumers, and all this, and with, of course, the aim to unlock an important flexibility potential. So, next slide, please. So interface actually has 7, I would say, large-scale demonstrators that will be executed in 3 main thematic pillars. One has to do with the mitigation of congestions and the activation of local flexibility resources for system balancing services through the Ict platform, operated by TSOs and DSOs in a coordinated manner. Secondly, to test state-of-the-art digital technologies such as blockchain for peer-to-peer energy transactions. And last but not least, to promote the integration of the distributed energy resources into the electricity markets and demonstrate the mechanism that will lead to the establishment of a seamless pan-European market. Next slide, please. So in this slide, you can see the thematic areas, the demonstrators, and the geographical distributions of the countries and the TSOs and DSOs that are participating in this interface project. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned many times earlier, what is the core of our interface vision is this interoperable pan-European grid services architecture, the Ict architecture, that lies between the actors and their assets and the different tools and services they have in their possession, the different market models they use, the different data sets they produce, and at the other side are the new services in the 3 thematic areas that I mentioned earlier. So in between lies the Ict architecture that actually will enable this coordination of actions and this transparency that is requested. So next slide, please. So this is the SGAM 5-layered architecture approach. So this is where the project starts now. So in order to design the engineering blueprint of the EXA system, we adopted the bottom-up, top-down approach. So we wanted, on the one hand, to actually take advantage of the knowledge, the expectation, and the specific needs of our demonstrators, the demonstrators that are participating in the interface project. At the same time, on the other hand, we wanted to provide guidance based on the knowledge, on lessons learned, on our knowledge from the active system management proposal, from other EU projects, but also the directives and the strategies of the European Commission. So a top-down analysis was first carried out in order to identify the relevant market and non-market services and develop a classification on which services to implement, what are the interactions between actors for each market phase. Please, next click. Thank you. So the relevant services that were described in our, let's say, vision, also taking into account the different market structures, include the overall interface scenario that is composed by the processes, as you may see, of the grid qualification, product qualification, procurement, bid qualification, activation, and settlement. At the same time, 4 main services have been selected, according to the common, let's say, objects of investigation of the different demonstrators. And these are the balancing, which can be carried out by means of automatic or manual frequency restoration reserve. And at the same time, congestion management, which is operated by means of short-term and operational reserves. So for all these 4 aforementioned services, and as part of our demonstration phase, we will cover several scenarios using the different market options as these have been foreseen in the active system management report. So at the same time, and what is now on the slide on the information and the communication layer, we also set the basis to address data interoperability within a rather, let's say, interdisciplinary and multinational environment. And this is where we want to promote a systematic way, a standardized way, to finally develop a modular interoperable data governance layer. Finally, based on the general requirements regarding the transparency, but also the coordination between the system actors, we decomposed the core of the interface platform into different architectural components. These are namely, as you can see in the function layer, the flexibility component, the TSO-DSO coordination platform, the single market interface, and also the settlement unit. So next slide, please. Next clip, please. Yes, thank you. So the previous one, please. So I'm concluding with this. So if I may say a few more words about the flexibility register, which is very important at this stage, is that this is actually has been designed according to the active system management report that recommends the usage of a flexibility resources register for a coordinated, efficient, and a secure active system management process. And the EXA flexibility register actually gathers and shares relevant information and potential sources of flexibility. It is country-specific, but also includes our European vision for interoperability, where the flexibility service providers can bring their products to the markets. At the same time, the TSO-DSO coordination platform is actually the gateway through which the operators can access the EXA platform and exchange data through well-defined and interoperable APIs, facilitating in this manner the coordination that is requested. The single interface to market is the gateway and the point of connection of our EXA platform to the different market platforms. And the settlement unit is actually the module that will calculate the settlement and will publish the respective results. Next slide, please. This is the interface consortium that is being composed by 42 partners representing the system operators, aggregators, regulators, industrial partners, academic institutions, international organizations, and the ENTSO-E. Next slide, please. And these are the means which you can use in order to follow our activities. And with this, I conclude. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm here to reply to any questions.
Thank you, George. If I look at Slido, currently I do not have any specific questions for you there. However, I mean, if I take a look at your charts and if I see all these details and the different layers and you're basically researching a pan-European architecture there. Still, once again, my question, do you expect to have any indications from that about what should be harmonized on a European level of all these details that you look into with the architecture, and what should be left to member states?
Mm-hmm. So yes, so for the moment, according to the information that we have now in our hands, the vision is to provide an IP platform, let's say, that could be easily deployed on a scale that is requested by the needs of the European Commission and the member states. Meaning that, for example, we have a demonstrator that this platform is quite flexible and modular and scalable. That includes a cluster of countries, 3 countries with their DSOs and TSOs. And this gives us, let's say, we have designed this platform in order to be able to accommodate their needs. This platform can be deployed on a regional, on a national, on a European, let's say, level. As far as the standardization and things that we will actually try to identify, indeed, we're working with, for example, with the EcoSP platform of ENTSO-E. We're working on the common information model. Of course, we are not at the level where we can say, we can tell what are the additions, what are the extensions that we are proposing. However, we expect that based on also on this, let's say, vision of ours, we expect that we will have very soon some things to propose.
Great to hear. Again, we are a bit short on time. Thank you, George. I think that was extremely interesting and it was impressive also. I'm handing back over to Antonio, and Jan has sent a message saying he's back, so maybe he could get a few minutes. That's up to you, Antonio. I don't know how we are with the time at the moment. Antonio? Okay, then I'm going to continue. Jan, how many more slides do you have?
I have 2 more slides starting from the last.
If you could quickly finish them, because we are really short on time and we are still waiting for the last contribution. Go ahead, please.
Of course. Okay. I finish on the right side, advantages of decentralized optimization. I don't know exactly where I finished there, but anyway, so advantages that it is a stepwise implementation. It's more specific to system operator needs, and it has a simpler algorithm. That's why this single algorithm might be cheaper, might be more suitable for the current legislative regulatory framework, and it has a higher resilience, because if one algorithm fails, and of course not the whole system fails. Next slide, please. We studied then the question to which, or the question of what are the advantages and disadvantages if you allocate this role of the optimization operator to different actors. We studied it once for each DSO and TSO in case of decentralized, to decide it to the allocation to one TSO for centralized, but we also studied the question of a joint venture of TSOs and DSOs for centralized optimization, and we also thought about allocating this role to a commercial third party, which could be the market operator, and this could work in centralized and in decentralized optimization. Just a reminder, the optimization operator, in our view, has the responsibility of selecting the flexibility bits and if necessary, also selecting the switching measures in order to keep the operational security within the defined limits, and also taking it into account certain kind of grid data. You can find a comprehensive table in the deliverable. I don't want to go into all details, but what has become very clear is if you allocate the optimization operator to another actor than each system operator, and you have a significant governance and regulation challenges, not only because the system operator is, of course, responsible for system operation, but also because in the end, you have got, if the OO is anyone else than each SO, then anyone else selects the bids, but the SO pays in the end. So there you've got challenges with regard to incentivizing the improvement of the algorithm and the efficient bid selection. Next slide, please. This here is only a really short summary on a quite big chapter about joint procurement. I recommend you to read it because I think it's quite interesting in the end. We developed a joint product for MFRR and congestion management. And this is the prerequisite in the end for making the whole process working. And it means that such joint product in the end has to comply with both MFRR and congestion management requirements. So it must be as fast as MFRR, but it must also be as locational as needed for congestion management, and also has to describe the rebound behavior if this is existing. We developed 3 different versions. The first versions is that first you do congestion management, and then you transfer the residual bits to the balancing. The second is that you have a joint bidding phase of congestion management and balancing, but a separate bid selection. And the third one is that you have a joint bidding phase and a joint bid selection. And the latter could mean that you can create synergies. So you might need a lower flexibility volume to solve both scarcities. All versions actually reveal different cost increasing and decreasing effects, and also different challenges, mainly with regard to transaction costs and liquidity. So it could also be the case that in total the liquidity decreases and transaction costs increase. So it really depends on the design, it depends on the national situation, the volume of congestions, the volume of imbalances, etc. From a technical point of view, currently we only see the version 1 feasible, because everything else means that the time constraints are too tight for congestion management processes. So the result is that combining MFRR and congestion management can be of advantage, but this is not a given thing, and it must closely be looked into detail, and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. I think we should skip the questions for the time being, because Maurizio is still waiting and we are really late. I thought these last 2 charts were exactly to the point, and it was worth having a look at them, because they were talking about the delineation of regulatory and commercial domain, and they were also focusing on the relationship between congestion management and balancing. Antonio is there. Over to you.
Yes. Can I make just a quick question to Jan? Being a TS, I'm very worried of somebody else doing the optimizing operator role. I see in the slides that this is already considered a challenge from regulatory and even more from governance. If you just can give a flash, how you think this will be possible, and maybe we can later also bilaterally continue. But this is an important point for TSOs.
Actually, most of the TSOs and DSOs in the project did not think that this is possible, and I also do not think that this is possible and that we should strive for it. But in the end, it is something which has been discussed And the report only then shows, okay, if we discuss this, then what does it mean in the end?
Okay, so this is food for thoughts. For time reason, I would now go to the last project presentation by Maurizio Fantino. He is from Links Foundation, where he's head of ICT for Energy Research Area, and he will talk about the Insight EV project, where he's work package leader. And this will be specific on electromobility, which hasn't been touched specifically until now, but is probably fast ramping up in the future and will change dramatically many things in transport and energy sectors. Please, Maurizio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonio, and hello to everyone. Good afternoon. So it's a pleasure to present our Insight EV project. In order to save some time, maybe we go directly to slide number 3 and skip the agenda, please. So Insight EV, sorry, the previous one. Thank you. So the Insight EV project is a big project with 20 million of funding. We have 33 partners spread in 8 different European countries. The consortium is led by the group Renault. I believe that all the major and relevant stakeholders are very well represented in the project, because we have partners from the automotive sectors, we have tech providers, we have the cities, where of course the electrical mobility will be in place. We have, of course, also the energy sectors very well represented, with energy utilities, DSO and TSO. And last but not least, always the university and the research centers, because we don't have to forget that this is an innovation action. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So Insight EV was actually submitted to the GB03 call, user-centric charging infrastructure, in 2019. So it shouldn't surprise that this project is very much user-centric and user-driven. The aim is to demonstrate an innovative set of charging infrastructures as well as technologies in order to enhance the EV user experience, especially for what concerns the users. Not only that, of course, because the idea is also to bring what we're going to do very quickly to the market. So we also have a deep focus on business modeling, and also some attention we devoted to fostering, so to promote NEV market share in the European Union. What we're gonna do will be demonstrated in 5 different cities, and we will have 7 different use cases. The first use case is connected to the smart and bidirectional charging, and this will be demonstrated in Amsterdam and Utrecht. The second and the third use cases are actually related to the dynamic wireless charging technologies. The first one directly in Paris and will be actually related to the short distance, while the other one will be in the Versailles region and will be a prototype for testing long distance dynamic wireless charging. Use case number 4 is the one that will be demonstrated in Torino, where Links Foundation is. This use case is quite interesting in my opinion, because we are going to study the possibility to use the energy harvesting coming from the regenerative brake of trams to power up storage systems and charging points. Use case number 5 will be on smart fast charging tailored to European corridors, and this will be demonstrated in Tallinn, Estonia. And the last 2 use cases is use case number 6 and use case number 7 will be both demonstrated in Zaragoza. The first one will be on low power DC bidirectional charging infrastructures, while the second one will be once again on the wireless charging, but the application will be for taxi queue lanes in airports and central stations. We also have 2 follower cities, one in Turkey and the other one in Germany. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Insight EV has 6 main goals. The first one is to deepen the knowledge about the user expectation. As I said, Insight EV is a user-driven project, so the users are placed in the center of all our activities. Goal number 2 is connected actually to the technological part, so to the implementation, design, and development of this innovative, and I heard very much about in this virtual session talking about interoperability. So this charging station will be interoperable one to the other in different conditions. Goal number 3 is, let me say, completely focus on the ICT ecosystem, because in this project we will also develop a decision-making tool, a decision support system, as well as some specific user apps in order to increase and enhance the user charging experience and the driving experience. If you can go to the next slide, please, so that I can discuss the other 3 goals. Goal number 4 is actually connected to the piloting activities of the project in these 5 cities, and the goal is actually to reach with these charging points that we are going to develop in the project at least the technology readiness level 8. Goal number 5 is related to the creation of a business model, because potentially we want to go very quickly to the market with the technology we are going to do. And last but not least, goal number 6 is very common to the other European projects, because as you might know, all the European projects should actually disseminate and communicate what they are doing, and also to engage the most relevant stakeholders in order to promote the activities and potentially to find also some investors. Next slide, please. So few words about the methodologies, because we are short in time. We have a very big work package, which is work package 2, completely devoted to the user. So users will be interviewed, their expectation will be analyzed in order to elicitate specific requirements and specification, which will be one of the main input for work package 3. Work package 3 is completely dedicated to the charging point technologies. As you have seen in slide number 4, I believe we have different technologies and different use cases for that. But this will not only the only source, of course, of requirements and specification, because also other requirements will arrive from work package 4, where the requirements not connected directly to the user, but to the, let me say, the power grid infrastructure, but also to the mobility infrastructure, so the traffic, will actually feed work package 3. All these 3 work packages will be the major inspiration of work package 5 and work package 6, where the Insight-EV ICT ecosystem will be developed. If we can go to the next slide, which I believe we can skip because we discussed already about the Agile methodology. I'm saving some time, so very short. The idea is actually to iterate requirements and specification and elicitation in order to add in an incremental way features to the tool we are going to develop and to the technology we are going to develop. And also to consider a potential change request from the market and the technology. So next slide, please. In these latest 4 slides, I would like to spend a little bit more time about the ICT ecosystem, which is the, let me say, the part of the project activity that I'm following the most and that I know better because I'm work package 6 leader, which is in charge to develop this top layer that is presented in this picture. Don't worry about the picture because I will have some zoom in the next two slides. So we have mainly two layers, the bottom layers, which is actually the main ICT data gathering layer, and the top layer where the user applications and this decision-making tool will be hosted. The idea here is to have a decision support system to support mobility planner and policy makers. For us, for Insight-EV, mobility planners are indeed either city planners and DSO and TSO. So the idea is to provide to city planner and to DSO and TSO a tool capable to understand, for example, how specific penetration of electrical mobility different placement of charging technologies, size and seating here and there in the city level, how it might affect the mobility in the city itself, as well as potentially the impact on the power grid. The other part of the top layer is actually connected to the user applications, because users will be actually the drivers and the main consumer of energy delivered to the charging points. So we need to provide to them very clean and lean applications. Of course, we will indeed provide some conventional application like the parking reservation, so you can actually reserve your parking place with specific charging technologies. Interoperable payment, nothing new on that. But what we want to do more in this component is actually to work on smart charging, also including the vehicle to grid and algorithms to better fit what is the flexibility that the electrical mobility and all these services can provide to the power grid. If we can go to the next slide. This is the bottom layer of the ICT ecosystem, which will be developed by Atos in Work Package 5 with the support of Links and of other partners. We have a very standard, I would say, ICT architecture for the middleware and the field layers. So we have what you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, the edge layer. The edge layer is actually the part of the ICT architecture closer to the field. So what we have in the demo site, so we have the field devices, so in this case the electrical vehicles, the charging points, the smart meters to meters the energy which has been delivered, and the connectors able to feed with the relevant data the cloud. The cloud here is representing the right-hand side of the slide with the ICT orchestration engine. This tool will be able to provide some data quality management. So when you gather data from the feed, you always have to check the quality, and in case of lack of quality, try to actually fix them. We will have, of course, a layer for the device management, because in case of a big penetration of devices, you need to have a very easy tool to add and remove charging points or to update charging points from one technology to the other, and this cannot be done in a manual way. Cybersecurity features, of course, this cannot be neglected. And then the data lake that which will be fed by the data coming from the demo site, as well as from third-party, I would say, applications like weather services, but also databases, open databases with charging point locations for cities, energy, price, and so on. Next slide, please. So this is actually a view of the top layer of the ICT ecosystem. So what we are going to do in Work Package 6, where I'm the leader, starting from the user application layer, as I mentioned, we are going to have a dashboard, a user app for the users that can actually interact with the platform in an easy and user-friendly way. And as I said, we will focus very much for these applications mainly on the smart charging features. The idea is to use the most advanced AI technologies, and here we have very well competencies in the consortium for doing that, in order to better understand, better predict which will be the charging demand, and to predict with a very high accuracy the charging demands for the same day and day after potentially, in order to accommodate and provide flexibility services to the network, mainly to the DSO network. The other component of the Work Package 6 is this decision support system. So as I said, this is not actually mean to the drivers, but to the planners. We will have different planners. As I said, city planners and potentially city planners will be major interested in understanding how certain penetration of electrical vehicles for different I would say, typology, as well as different technologies of charging points might affect the traffic. Why, for example, for these users of the DSS, the effect of the power grid is meaningless, because they, as KPI, they just have you know, the reduction of the queue line and the charging time. But we have also other users of the DSS in our minds, so DSO and TSO. So for them, what we will provide is a tool capable to understand, for example, if specific penetration of electrical vehicles or different technologies placed in the city level might affect the power distribution grid. Here, I have to mention that the idea is not to go deeply in the simulation condition to create a simulation tool. We already have plenty of simulation tool for doing power flow simulation and so on. The idea is to provide a very quick tool in terms of computation time in order to evaluate potential scenarios, in order to address which are the scenarios that might need a simulation, and go in details for that specific scenario with the specific analysis with expert and professionals of the field. So the DSS will mainly have in our mind, and I say in our mind because the project was kicked off on January this year, so we actually are closing the month 6 of activity. So this is actually a presentation of what we want to do and not what we have already done. The DSS, in our idea, will be built mainly on 3 different modules. This mobility module, which will be able to understand the impact on the mobility. The power module that, according to some surrogated modeling, stochastic models, so without the requirements, the need of having the grid typology provided, try to understand the impact of this scenario on the power grid. And of course, the link between these 2 modules will be the user features, so the user behavioral model. Insight TV, for the 3rd time, is a user-driven model. So we also need to evaluate which will be the user anxiety and the user preferences in terms of electrical mobility. Next slide, please, and this will be the end of the presentation with some final remarks. So Insight TV will actually try to demonstrate how innovative smart charging solution might affect the electrical mobility, both at the user level, but also the infrastructure level. We will do that in 5 different demo cases, very well spread around the European Union. We will actually consider also 7 different use cases. So also in terms of technologies, we believe that we will cover pretty much what will be, we believe, the future of the charging point technologies. And we will deliver also these 2 interesting tools, the decision support system and also user applications for users that are planners and users which are drivers. So very much I believe that the electrical mobility and what we will do will be very connected to the topic of this virtual session on flexibility and new market, because definitely the electrical mobility will open new markets and new services for many. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurizio, for this very interesting. Time is going, but just let me from my side one comment and one question. One comment is I think it's very useful to get the user perspective. We always think what the transport sector can do to our sector, electricity sector, but we have also to think the opposite. Why should a user, an owner of electric vehicle or other flexibility mean provider provide this flexibility? What he has in change, it is not only a question of cost or price, it's also a question of perception and behavior. And the question is, I see inside no residential charging infrastructure, only urban and extra-urban. Actually, residential charging is probably the most interesting for grid operators to get services vehicle to grid, because they can stay, the vehicles can stay still for a number of hours. Is it correct that this is out of scope for you?
It is out of scope indeed, because actually it was not considered by the GV03 topic. So the call was actually focusing the attention only on public charging points, so not private charging points. In any case, our project, and especially the DSS, will not actually forget the private charging stations, because when you actually will emulate or simulate what will be the charging demand, you cannot forget the state of charge of the arrival of the vehicles to the charging points. So if all the users will charge during nighttime their vehicles, they will do it probably in their home. So the home charging will be considered at that level. But for understanding the impact of the charging points on the power grid, we will not consider how to place, for example, the best size and the best technology in terms of charging points at the home, but for sure for the public, yes. Because potentially for a mall, you might use fast charging technologies, but for example, for a wireless dynamic charging, you can't do that, in your house, because you need a long way in order to, place all the technology under the rod. So I don't know if I've replied back to your question, but actually was a limitation of the topic of the call, not of the concept. I cannot hear you, Antonio. Sorry.
Both who were only listening and who made questions. It's a connection issue. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
We
just
can,
leave the
Antonio.
floor for a final wrap up to Christos Dikaiakos, the Greek operator Iptor, where he's head of section of planning and management of R&D projects, and is very in our ENTSO-E association, where he leads the working group on flexibility and market within the innovation committee.
Good evening, Antonio and everyone. No, usually time always presses the last presenter. So if we can go just to the next slide, and I may skip some of them. So we know the vision of the framework. We know that distributed flexibility represents a significant source for TSOs from 2030 and onwards. So what do we have? We do have the assets, which are usually connected to the distribution transmission network. And what we are missing is the mechanism that can unlock the flexibility to address the constraints that current electricity system faces and those that we have to overcome in the future. At the same time, clean energy packets trigger DSOs to use local flexibility and distribute flexibility to access to all markets. So if we can go to the next slide, we see that what are the primary tasks that the flexibility platform shall perform. So we see that 6 are the primary tasks. This figure sets out the 6 primary tasks. All of them are important, but the 3 first of them, coordination, procurement, dispatch, and control, are of crucial importance to delivering flexibility into the electricity system. Coordination, of course, composed of communication with external platforms, facilitation of data flows, harmonization of products and standards. Procurement is the matching between purchasers and producers, and dispatch and control is verification and activation of the assets that have been already dispatched. But under this framework, main questions are being generated, like what should be the approach? Should be market or cost-based? Who will be the buyer, TSO or DSO? The services, are we talking only about congestion management, balancing? Payments should be on reserve or availability. So one way to help us answer these questions, if we can go to the next slide, are the recommendations and basic principles that are reported on the ASM Active System Management Report. So just to remember, 5 main principles are we can actually see the 5 major principles. So is the ease for the customer, the interoperability, the avoidance of harmful interference. That means a very effective TSO-DSO coordination scheme, and mutual data exchange, and platform solutions should be technology agnostic. So these are the 5 major principles of ASM report. But at the same time, there are many recommendations regarding congestion management, or what also George mentioned in his presentation for interface. For instance, he mentioned the concept of flexibility resources register. When we can gather and aggregate the information we have for all flexibility resources that are already pre-qualified. So if we can go to the next slide, can say that I'm pretty happy to see the alignment of the project that has been introduced today, that have been presented today. For instance, I'm pretty happy to hear the experience of Yvonne of the implementation regarding the Swedish demo, where we have actually a decrease in the violations in the Swedish systems, and that, for instance, the volume for congestion management was more than satisfactory. I can also be very happy from the interface that I heard about interoperable platform, the EXA platform, and also that actually we have there is a translation from the concept to actual implementation, for instance, for flexibility register. Not also to mention the progress that have been done also in the EU Swiss Flex for regarding not only the TSO-DSO coordination schemes, but also the centralized and decentralized optimization approaches. And of course, and last but not least, in Mauricio's presentation, I'm very pleased also that beside the technologies, beside the optimization infrastructure they have planned, they have also taken into consideration a decision support system that can assist mobility planners, not only the city, but also TSOs and DSOs, so they can assess and the impact on their grid. And also, this is actually a way to boost the penetration of EVs and in general distributed flexibilities. So I think we are in alignment with the ASM report and also with the framework of the clean energy package. And I'm very pleased to hear that we discuss now not only about concepts, but about concrete solutions which actually are implemented in the demo sites. So I know we are run out of time. So just to conclude, also, if we can go to the next slide, I can skip the other ones. I think that the R&I projects and flexibility platforms, more specifically, can also help us. And currently there is an ongoing exercise and analysis regarding the integration of distributed flexibility in balancing congestion management services. And one part of this is can we gain from the good practices of R&I project in national and EU level? And the answer is actually yes, because R&I projects, for instance, in balancing TSO-DSO congestion management, can actually address the issues that we've identified, beginning for roles and responsibilities, up to interaction with other processes and so on. So that's me from my side as a general conclusion. Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, yes. I think Laurent will close the.
Yes, so thanks a lot to everyone to have contributing to this InnoGrid new webinar. This was extremely rich in terms of content. We started with a keynote speech highlighting the need to position innovation in the broad context of EU Green Deal and all the new regulatory environment coming with it, and particularly the new EU DSO entity. And in the second step, we went into detail on how we progress on various concepts on the basis of the ASM report, which were produced by our association, and I'm very confident the community which has been built around the InnoGrid conference will be very useful in the coming years to ensure this rolls out at a further step. So thanks a lot for attending, and we are all looking forward the next session of InnoGrid and webinar.